So the first poem is called Alive in Rome. One. The speed of Storyville is brutal. How do we enjoy being alive this way? The moss on the stone sidewalks of the city in July, the sun pulling steam from the trunks of trees at dawn after a night of rain. Does it have something to do with learning to slow down, to chase the voices in the mind so we may walk to our fate without panic? I likely have a few more days before my last, unless I step onto the path of this oncoming bus or sneak onto the rooftop of the skyscraper behind me and spend some minutes watching the planes fly above the layer of smog. The light turns green. I move in the stream of pedestrians. Are we actually creators? They say we can sew hinges and new lights into the fabric of the living world. 2. I have these hands that people say are beautiful. I would trade them for a bright cadaver that could live on starlight. Eyes open to paraded days as if these updates could sustain me. Let's erase it all and take it out to dinner. Let's use the God-vacated churches for the cavernous beauty they surround with. The summer's just begun and Rome keeps flourishing as it rots. 3. I could be someone else entirely tomorrow. In an hour, new stranger, my love for you will be carved into a firework I'll toss someday to make the day's end a bit warmer. Here on earth, we tear open our cables to see inside. We could survive on foreign blood for the rest of our going lives. So what if the hungerless go nameless? So what if the hungry toss their names out at the walls of ruins that will be? 4. Dear Alice, the city I write you from is massive. Its noise a bright metallic surge that loves the night above the traffic. On Reforma, couples exchange mouths reflected in glass. What speck becomes me? What terrible dreams wait at the bottom of the morning? I've been barely conscious lately. We belong to the polluted air the planes fly through. Here they decorate the sidewalks with bronze plaques of the disappeared. 5. Go on, go ahead. Embrace the wars, the insanity, the wastefulness and the wet grass glinting. Carry clouds and sunsets in your eyelashes. Leave us what's behind you. This next thing that I'm going to read is just a few pages from my book, which is titled Remains, like Evan said. Here it is. When we were done with childhood, we drank and smoked and agreed that a defeated generation could not be mourned. On the balcony, laughing and flushed for a moment with belief, the old balm about how everything that disappears is returning somewhere almost felt tangible, as if there, just on the other side of being alive. We strapped ourselves to the minutes. I've said see you around many times, but knew each time that I might not. Blind insects fly in the dark and occasionally bump against the pilgrim's face. The path winds under the freeway and goes past the last rows of identical houses at the edge of the city. He never knows what to say when people ask him where he's going. There's no point in walking but to walk. Each morning is a process of remembering his hands, the legs and feet that carry him, the nights turned to silver tatters in his pockets. The veins under the marble resemble lines of sea foam. The coffee in my veins helps keep my hands in constant motion. I have one cigarette left behind my ear. The miles of rail that would connect us, dear friend, this afternoon lie gleaming in the valleys, gathering heat in perfect solitude. I can pluck no answers from the humid afternoon. Love is draining, and yet I wish you more of it, that it might fill you past completion, give you music as you step into a crowd, make you borderless. When the bridges folded, we sought solace in the words of our past minds, found ways to praise ourselves, aware we were nonetheless falling apart. Here the only option is to start forgetting everything. On the rooftops of the city, we look up and write the stars down in our tablets, renaming each of them at whim. Only impulse can save us, a jolt of need. We trade goodbyes like digital animals in dying clothes. As I fell, I closed my eyes and imagined flying. The pain of landing was almost absurd in its unexpectedness, but it was final. Every night I am forced to face my boundaries. Every day a search for a breaking point that proves elusive. In our boredom we meet, strangers feeling kinship, as if we sense for the first time a connection that we used to possess and whose loss we, distanced by consciousness and flesh, have no way to shake off. Of the two, it's pain that has the keener edge. This chipping away of one's connections keeps us watching. Tendons sliced open, leaving behind two lonely pieces of skin. This is us in our beds dreaming of separate caves. In a building of collapsing stairs, I contemplated pleasure, the body of a stranger beside me. From inside her sleep, a voice was saying, "There are tigers in the hallways." Our cages melted. We had no idea where to go. Next to the generator, a patch of tall weeds sways with breeze. The steel poles from which the traffic lights hang bob up and down lightly. The white freeway walls are peeling. On concrete benches, people wait for evening, for rain, for calls. A hummingbird floats above an empty lot. From a hard plastic bus seat, a woman looks out at the asphalt blurring by. Everything is going somewhere. The power plant's gray fumes blend into the low gray clouds. The tide is way out. Blind to its own end, the hummingbird moves in eternity. Do you recall that spring? We paused to hear the sound of the waves. The crashes carried in the wind that shook the branches under which we napped. In the afternoon we woke and fumbled off our clothes, forgot our names and said nothing for hours. These islands of youngness keep my mind company. Do you remember the organ playing its song in the living room in winter? Everyone was high and sharing cigarettes on the back porch. I carry these days in my cells, cells that keep dividing and dying off. He made us from flesh after much self-debate and obsession. He made mountains filled with the metals we needed to transcend the sky. He made weeping trees and insects that burst from the rivers. He made frogs and ravines and ghosts to live in the caves. He made hunters and prey and men who would die for intangible things. And once it was finished, he turned himself into a small brown cricket and set himself down on a patch of grass to live and die in his creation, having made himself forget that he ever made anything. Okay. So this next thing that I'll read is something that I'm still working on. It's a long poem, sort of following the structure and the themes and sort of imitating the language of this guy named Mahmoud Darwish. I don't know if any of you have heard of him. He's a Palestinian poet. He's a very, he died recently, and he wrote a poem called Mural. And the title of the poem sort of gives you an idea of what the poem is. It's a mural, you know, it has narrative sections, but it sort of just flows and it kind of goes into different parts. So this is an attempt at, you know, following his poem and kind of paying homage to him. And I'm going to read so the poem, so Darwish wrote a poem when he was in the hospital after having suffered like a heart failure, and he thought he was going to die, and he was like 80, like 70 something, and he thought he was going to die soon, and so he thought this was the last poem that he was ever going to write, and after having lived like a pretty intense life, and the poem is concerned a lot with death and with his country. So how to write a poem like that from being 28, relatively healthy, and having experienced none of that is a strange thing. But trying to sort of speak from where I am, but about similar themes, and trying not to, trying to sort of reach for a conversation with this person who's dead and in a totally different place than me. So here it is. I'm going to start reading from a section of the poem that comes later on. There's a she in the poem that came earlier. There's like a narrative, sort of like a love story narrative that ties the thing together, and then some divagations and other stuff. So here it is. It's untitled. Time has not waited for anyone late for their birth. Trade the lamp of your past for each dead starlit night. Though surely, said a poet, one of those stars must still be alive. And when we are again your victims, earth, and not your tomb builders, let the past be new and the future hang over us like the promise of a storm that gives back what we decayed into your winds. The stones keep silent what the dead forgot, and they don't grow older, and they don't keep time by screen light. In the stillness that surrounds us, in which our comedies transpire, and we toss forth and back our markets and wars, there with the dead, all pronouns dissolve. Here is an I, a she, a you, a we, drops in the desert sand. No living tells the dead, become me, yet the dead do. Years ago, in a hospital in Texas, Darwish arrives where time is zero. Death's representatives stand at his body's portals, waiting for the heart to stop. In that turbulence turned whiteness, he is not alive or dead. Void and being have vanished. His mind disbands, his eye steps into the open and does not return. Years later, I sit in my bedroom immersed in a spell he left on pages in a sick room on days when he did not expect any new skies again to greet him. Just between us ghosts, you conjurer of voices, exorcist of your own cage and garden. How good it is to know that you are older than the earth now and younger than this living me who writes these letters down. And time is zero when birth launches us into this nebula from where our minds extend, perceive, and speak for a moment in a void where bodies with gravity endlessly spin. Someday I'll be the waves of light my eyes decline to perceive, the particles that move through my cells silently. Expand your attention, she would say. It's your only limit. On a rumpled mattress by a window with a view of a lawn and a street covered in white, she would say, I love looking at you. And I would tell her, each of your movements is this small addiction I have. I love keeping your secrets. And she would say, your insanity is my science. What you want of me is yours for however many nights and days will take us. Now sleep. Sleep is good in winter. Be calm and worthy of what you dream. And I saw us at a party at the end of winter long ago, kissing in the hallway while everyone danced, your face warm against mine. I slipped my hand under your shirt, surprised to be surprised again by your softness, and your skin etched its breath on my palm. We woke in different cities, and I wasn't dreaming, I was dreaming. Outside, the wind reminded me of my skin. I reached to touch your face on a grassy field where we released the ground and the sky played its rain to us. And I saw the last evening on earth. On the last evening on earth, we sever our days from the buildings and roads, and we sever our days from the water. We do not count the maps imprinted behind us or the maps left ahead undrawn. On the last evening, we say goodbye to nothing and find no time to end who we are. Everything advances. The place releases our dreams and exchanges its flora. We can muster no irony here where the ground is ready to host the dust. And I saw Nietzsche and Ali Ahmad Said walking along the bank of a polluted river, not looking for hierarchies or poetry. In a city of late dreams, in an age of collapse, their conversation was a swarm of leaves blowing above the factories. In their winter coats, far from the tenure of their tasks, they followed the river out of the city and up toward the ice. I saw a childhood friend in me, grown, sitting in an empty, lit-up baseball field, reading the book of our broken plans. Empty, light-limbed, we rose from the grass and walked into town, then in a crowd of faces we lost sight of us. I saw Ceylon throw his country out of his poem. You stripped off the flesh of my language. I'm too awake to see what you see. Vision is a light that opens voids or leads to madness. I saw North America embrace me with indifference and automated courtesy. Be our progress. Claim your idle way and work while you eat from our distractions. And I thanked my younger self and his friends for the recklessness and stealing that kept us sane. I saw my father climbing onto a bus that would take him north, and as my mother and I walked out of the station into a faceless crowd, he became a strange, distant world, though I didn't think of it as we continued past street vendors and beggars. And as he stared out through the bus window at the desert he was entering, what did I become? As my mother and I crossed the pedestrian bridge, the cars below became water, the sky opened, and I was alone again inside my days. And I saw myself one night, years later. My thoughts, having detached from me, were plunging every moment unrestrained toward nothingness. Friends told me it would pass. That night, I sat in my pajamas on the fire escape's metal balcony, drinking, smoking cigarettes at the clouds, and listening to the clangs of the nearby train yard as I waited for sleep. And when sleep came, I dreamed of an island where the last pair of flightless birds watched the human boats approaching. But the mind is only smoke. I keep remembering those birds of prey we saw on our first walk in the woods. Wounded in their cages, the caretakers feeding them raw meat in the tree-filtered light. I'm so far from the beginning of my dreaming on paper that my language has become a riddle to me. One thread of sun is enough to pierce this day full of catastrophe and fantasy. One thread of sun that changes flags and distant shores where soldiers have built this era of forgetfulness for me. Is there a country larger than its listeners? Or a country smaller than its trash? Our machines widen our habits, and the letters of a poem illuminate the guns hanging from the branches of the seasons, and the song either augments or impoverishes the evening. So this last poem is called Why the Dark is Good for Digging. And it's in 3 parts. Okay. 1. Because our language was learned, and in its slippages we find the idiom of our age. I'm trying to unearth the shapes of my own disaster and be done with me. Because an animal will lies beneath logic, because I would befriend and dance with it, wrestle back my finite resources and dash them against the days others made. Because almost every stranger breaks my heart, I want to give them my attentive company, want them to see that I'm awake and can see them, that I find us fascinating in our disguises. Because on my walk home, the magic of solitude unburdens my limbs. I believe it wants to take me. When I'm not in love, the days slow down just enough to show how empty they can be. 2. Because young is the season and young the way we speak to one another as we walk to the theater. In the movie about astronauts, the tenderest moments happen when the heroes must decide how they'll face dying. I wanted to be with them at the end of their last glimpse of the world. When we left, the parking lot was empty. Fast food signs glowed in the middle distance above other empty lots. 3. Because in the tail end of the empire, I leave the walls of my apartment blank. The devil floats in the headlines, and God is a silent song in the hearts of the hopeful, and both of them are wrong. Blood flows through us, and that's what the dance is. I need more drinks tonight and less light. Thanks.